Welcome, everybody, to the Grit Unleashed podcast, where we take on today together so that tomorrow can be ours. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'm sitting here with one of Nacho's daughters, Kaylee. So, hi, Kaylee. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Great. Thanks for coming on the show and chatting with me today. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and, a little bit about your background.
So, what's up? I'm Kaylee. I am the oldest of Nacho's children. I am currently still in college pursuing a degree in education, and I'm almost done. I'm hoping that I will be done sooner than I thought because I'm ready to be done.
I understand that. So, what do you want to do with your education degree? I'm guessing you want to teach.
Yes. So, I'm hoping to teach elementary, but I'm also pursuing a special education degree, so I could really go anywhere. I'm just trying to cover all my bases because I'm not sure what I want yet.
And, we've already talked about this today is that sometimes you don't have to know what you want, just know where you don't want to be in order to find a direction, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about what life was like being a military child, a military brat, as they're so lovingly referred to as. So, how old were you whenever it started to dawn on you what your dad's job was, that he was in the military moving around?
I mean, I think it probably wasn't until somewhere in my early teens that it kind of sunk in. Like when I was younger, I definitely knew the word. Yeah, your dad's in the military. Yeah, we have to move a lot. But it didn't dawn on me the kind of work that he did until I was old enough to wrap my head around it, I guess. I never really put too much thought to it before I was about 13 or 14, I would say.
Yeah, so probably about the time that, you really had those really established relationships with friends, right? And you had to maybe move away from them.
Yes, definitely. I was at a point where I thought we really weren't going to move again. When I remember it being like, well, great. This is because of dad's job that we have to do this again.
Where were you whenever you were about 13? What base were you guys at?
We were actually at Robbins.
Oh, okay. The first time or more
Yeah,
recent?
this was still the first time.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So tell me a little bit about how you were feeling whenever it came time to move.
I definitely struggled with it when I was younger. When we left England the first time, I was only about 8. And from there, we moved every year until fifth grade. So 3 years in a row, I think we had moved. And I definitely really struggled with it. And it got to a point where we got to Robbins the first time, and I didn't really want to make friends because I wasn't sure how long we were going to be there. And I didn't want to put down what felt like any sort of roots if they were just going to be ripped out of the ground again.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to that a little bit too. With all of our moves, before I even came in, I was married to Brandon for, 7 years, and Robbins is our third move. And leaving the people that you start to call family really just is not easy at all. No matter how old, no matter how long you've known those people, you really start to depend on them.
Yeah. It's never an easy transition.
No, no, it's not. With that, how was it starting with new schools and trying to get involved in the rest of the community? Like going to after school things, or if you played any like intramural sports or anything like that. How was trying to adapt to moving and getting into the new community?
Well, I don't want to say lucked out, but I think it was easier for us because we wouldn't have to move in the middle of the school year. So it was a bit smoother transition to be able to get involved with, the other kids and see what's what in the neighborhood and what's what in town. Because everybody else is getting used to the new school year too, or the other people that I just moved for different reasons are also getting adjusted. So I felt like in that respect, it was pretty easy. But me personally, I was always a very anxious child. So it was always very difficult for me to just approach someone and talk to them. It was difficult for me to just say, hey, I think you're cool. I want to be your friend. But, we just did what we could and we just tried to make it work. But it wasn't always like okay, this is what needs to happen so I can do this with this person or go here so I can play with this person. It was just started talking to one person and see where it went.
Yeah, just letting things happen a little bit organically, as they say sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Um, so how do you think that made you more of a resilient child, a resilient kid growing up, especially once it started registering to you that, oh my gosh, like this is what my dad does and we move around so much, and especially into your teen years, because we all talk about, your teen years and how they're so pivotal. So, how did that affect your mindset, and what are some things that you came up with as a teenager and as a young adult to build resiliency in those situations?
So I definitely felt it was important. Like once it sunk in that what my dad did was what he did, I wanted to be braver, I guess. So I kind of made it my mission to do whatever I needed to do to kind of prove to myself and prove to him that, if he's going to do the sort of job he's doing and he's going to be brave in his way, then I was going to be brave in mine. And I was going to, talk to people and make friends and, do the hard things, even if it meant it would be a harder goodbye later.
That's really cool that he was able to be this kind of role model for you. And that probably made you a little bit of a role model for your younger sister and brother. So, how was that with watching them grow up alongside you and being that role model for them?
Now, if you ask my sister, I don't think she'd say that I was the role model, but um, I don't know. I wanted to be better for them, especially when dad was gone. As the oldest sibling, I felt like whether I was asked to or not, I stepped into a different kind of role, and I needed to be a sort of role model. I needed to be someone they could look up to kind of help hold it all together, so mom didn't feel like she was doing it on her own.
That's really like one of the sweetest and most inspirational things I think I've ever heard is, you just, being there for your family is so important, your immediate family and or the people that you call family, especially during times of uncertainty. It ties in even to the last episode that we talked about with brotherhood, just being that community for when times call for it. The people that are involved, specifically in the military, are going to be the ones that step up. So, why do you think that is? As somebody involved with the military, why do you think that's something that we always step into, that we end up stepping into those roles where if somebody needs us, that we just do it?
I think because we get it differently than I think people who don't live this life understand. We get it that it's so much more stressful when, parent one isn't there or sometimes even parent two as well. And we just we know what it's like to have been there. And so we want it to be easier for someone else, especially if we had it harder, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. I always like to talk about it that, we've moved so far away from our families time and time again that we don't have that same network that people might have. People settle down and they stay where maybe they went to high school and they have that village, so to speak, that they've built up around them. And like we don't, right? We've moved away from that and we don't have that anymore. So it still takes a village for a family, regardless, if you have small children, teenage children, no children, people still need that sense of community and we've got to find it somehow.
Yeah. And I will say, like, it just reminds me of when I graduated high school because I graduated on base in England, actually. So when we had first moved there, we all had the same first new move jitters, but it was so easy to make friends. It was so easy to slip into like okay, I have people I can lean on because everybody was going through the same thing. Everybody understood. Everybody got it just a little bit more. So everyone was just that extra welcoming, that extra open, and that extra willing to help if you needed it.
That's awesome. So would you say that the connections that you established as a kid in the military are still some of your strongest connections that you have now?
Oh, absolutely. One of my absolute best friends, we only met because our dads worked together. And I'm now godmom to her daughter. So
That's amazing. So, what other kind of values do you think that you developed being a military kid?
so I do definitely value community and the importance of community and the importance of not doing it alone. But I also really value integrity and wanting to do the right thing, even if you know there's going to be no payoff, wanting to make it better for the next person, or even if it's nobody but yourself, just doing right by, I guess, at the end of the day, doing right by yourself, even if you feel like it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's a definition for integrity is that even though there's no payoff, you're not going to get paid for it, you're not going to get recognized, you're not going to get awarded, whatever it is, you're still going to do the right thing simply because it's the right thing. So, how did things like integrity help you deal with things like loss and trauma?
That's a tough one because I've been lucky enough to say that I have not lost a lot of people in my life personally, but I've seen, how it's affected my dad,
Hmm.
and it just again makes me want to keep doing the right thing because at the end of the day, if someone's gone, all you have is those memories, and you want to remember feeling like you did what you could, feeling like you've done your best for them or for everybody around them. And I feel like that, I don't want to say soften the blow, but it definitely helps, I think.
Yeah, and I'm sure you also dealt with the feeling of like not necessarily loss in the sense of like death, but not only were you leaving your friends, but your friends were leaving you. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
so yeah, so how did some of those values and things that you grew up with help you deal with those situations where, your really close friends were leaving because their mom or dad was also in the military?
I think it kind of gave me, it helped me keep the attitude of, you know, this doesn't mean it's goodbye forever. I'm sure we will cross paths in the future, or the universe will find a way to have us reconnect in some way. And it's just
Yes.
this is what today is. It doesn't mean that it's also tomorrow.
Right. And it means that you have those connections in all these other places in the world, right? Say
Mhm.
you have a friend that lives in Hawaii, like you can always go and stay at their house and wow, you have a free place to stay in Hawaii and you also
Yeah.
get to see your friend. So with leaving, how did you deal with your dad being deployed and gone for an extended amount of time?
I want to say it was kind of like a cycle. When he would first leave, those first couple weeks were hard on everybody,
Yeah.
adjusting to it, adjusting to our schedules changing because he wasn't there, adjusting to, the emotional aspect of it. But once everybody got settled, I think we just kept on trucking. We did what we had to do. I would shift into that more, obviously not parenty role, but definitely took on more to help mom and to help take care of my siblings. And we just, we did what we had to do. And we tried not to, think about it too much because then I felt like that opened up the way for more anxiety than was necessary.
They always say that sometimes there's the kid like you said that takes on that almost parental role. How much of that do you think you actually took on and how did your dad deploying factor in to the role that you took on in the family?
So it definitely wasn't as prevalent when I was younger, but as I became, in my later teens, it wasn't even a conversation that needed to be had. I just kind of knew that mom needed, X, Y, and Z. She needed me to make sure the kids, the rest of the kids woke up and we all ate breakfast, and,
Yeah.
make sure we all got to school on time. Sometimes she was working so late that I just had to make sure that everybody, had their homework done and just, got ready for bed, and just things that you wouldn't normally expect. I guess you could expect it from someone who's 16 or 17, but I just knew what needed to be done and just got it done for her because I didn't want it to feel that much harder when I knew there was stuff I could be doing to help her.
Yeah, and I mean, from me, like I was not a military kid. My dad was in the Navy, but that was before I was born that he was in and got out. So I personally at 16 or 17 couldn't imagine being that person that would have to help my brother get dressed. I mean, I was annoyed having to drive him to school just in that, like, let alone having to help him do his homework or get breakfast or whatever else. And I really think that's one of the things that make military kids, as again, as we always talk about resiliency, it makes military kids really very resilient and very adaptable to all the things that come at them in life. Before we talk about that too much, I want to ask, how was it transitioning to when your dad would come home? How was reintegration after deployment? Because I know how that is when Brandon comes home from deployment, and eventually when I come home from deployments, is like the reintegration process is not all, sunshine and rainbows like people might
Yeah.
think, right?
Yeah. It definitely wasn't all the time. I would say it was very delicate when he first comes home because
Yes.
we don't know what he's been through while he was deployed. So we would just kind of tread lightly and just try to make it as painless and as smooth as we could so he could, find his feet again,
Yes.
and figure out what he's got going on before we let like the real life stuff start coming back. Um it was sometimes it was hard because something would happen right before he'd come home and you would kind of have to put it on the back burner because you want him to be okay and you want to make sure that he's good and he's settled before you start dealing with whatever you've got going on.
Hmm.
Um, or there's stuff that like, oh, this really exciting thing happened, but dad just got home 2 days ago, so I'm not really gonna go do the thing because I want to go spend time with him because he just got home. But also, I don't know how much mental energy he has to spend with me right now because he just got home 2 days ago. So it was just finding a balance of what we felt like we could bring to him when he first got back.
Right, because when people come home from deployment, they have, that R&R, the rest and relaxation period that is supposed to happen after deployment. So, I think we all know, all the listeners here know that no Nacho know that his favorite place is Disney, right? So I know that he's always going to Disney now. How often was he going to Disney when he would come back from deployments?
Not that often. And honestly, if he was going, he wasn't taking me, so I don't know.
Well, let's hope he wasn't going and not taking you because
Well, I mean, he does it now, so
the audacity.
the audacity.
So you talk about striking the balance whenever, he would come home. How did you encourage your friends that you knew that had a parent or family member in the military? How did you help them with the balance in their lives?
I don't know that I would say I helped them like directly. Maybe in the sense of we would talk about things that would happen when our parents came home and we could
Hmm.
just relate to each other. And I guess that in itself could be very therapeutic, to find someone who gets it and just be like, oh, that happens too, or, yeah, my dad did that last time, or my dad's never done that, but he's done this similar thing. So I'd say just being supportive in that sense, because sometimes it's just nice to know that somebody else is dealing with it too.
Oh, for sure. Did you ever have any friends that maybe lost a parent due to anything that happened on the deployment or anything else? Like, did you have any friends who their parents maybe struggled with PTSD?
To be honest, I'm sure I did, but not a lot of their kids would talk about that. And I think some of it comes from like they didn't want to, not from like an embarrassment or a shameful sort of thing, but just like
Yeah.
they're they're dealing with it with their family, just like the same way that we would deal with it with ours.
Yeah, yeah. What about some of the things that you maybe had to tiptoe around with your dad? What is that like? Or what was that like? Or I guess could still be.
I will say that when I was between like 10 and 12, when he would come home, he was very sensitive to things getting loud. He could get really overwhelmed if it got too loud. And
Hmm.
having an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and how old was Aiden? Probably 5 or 6-year-old at the time.
Yeah.
You could probably imagine how loud it could get.
Loud kids, yes.
So we would just kind of have to be aware of that and just kind of, okay, maybe we shouldn't play down here. Maybe we should go play outside, or maybe we should just give him some space. Because we wanted to jump straight back into, okay, Dad, come play with us. Hey, we're gonna go do this. You're gonna come with us, but we know that we couldn't. So we just, hey, Dad, can you play with us? And he would tell us whether or not he was feeling up to it. Okay, we'll try again later and go do our thing. We tried not to like let it get to us, and it never really did because 11 and 9-year-olds are like, okay, on to the next thing. And off they go.
Ooh, shiny.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So again, that's very mature to me as for somebody who, is 11 or 9 to have that sense to know that, your parent just really isn't up to it because of something that they experience that's outside of your scope of understanding. So, are those skills that you've brought into your now adult life?
I would definitely say so. I definitely try to make sure that if I'm bringing something to someone, especially if it's an issue that I'm having, that I want to make sure they have the mental space for it. I want to make sure that I'm just not dumping another thing on them and, on the same end that I'm going to be heard with whatever I have to say. Because if you can't listen, that's fine, but that's something I want to know before I come to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think it's really cool and personally I think military kids are some of the coolest kids out there. We talk about like our friends that become family, and we have a particular close friend who her kids are basically like our kids, they're our nephews, and we always get them things for their birthday and holidays, and we spend holidays with them. I mean, they live in West Texas, so we drive all the way from Middle Georgia all the way out to West Texas to see them for various things, or they'll come out here, and we've built that sense of community with them, even though, they're a 16-hour drive away from us. That we can't wait to see them, and they can't wait to see us. And you know um they're starting to get to the age where they call on us for help, or they call on us whenever they're emotional and they don't know how to deal with the situation. And I just, again, I couldn't imagine, at 10 years old calling somebody that wasn't my mom and asking for help, and how that would have shaped me as a kid. And military kids, they have this certain level of adaptability, of resilience, of independence. What are some things in your life that you've used those qualities in your life?
I definitely think that I'm okay with being by myself now. And that was something that I didn't know. Obviously, I had two siblings, so I was never really by myself.
Yeah.
But I have learned to just be okay with doing things on my own for me, and just that's okay. Because sometimes that you just do what you got to do. I really think that it's important for people to be okay with being by themselves sometimes. And that was definitely something that I did learn growing up because I don't want to say I wasn't alone, obviously. I was never alone. But sometimes it felt kind of lonely not having dad there. So I had to learn to be okay with it and know that it wasn't, permanent. It wasn't forever. And it's okay to feel that way, but you got to keep moving through and keep going to the next thing.
Yeah. Did you have anything specific that you would tell yourself other than just, we just got to get through it, that would help you through those times whenever you felt particularly lonely?
I'm not sure if I had anything that I just told myself. I think I just dealt with how I was feeling and just moved on to the next moment.
Yeah. Well, again, I really think that shows the maturity of a military kid, and how they have to, develop that resilient mindset to be able to work through those unique situations and circumstances that come with having a parent who's in the military. Do you think you'll ever want to be in the military, or if you have any kids, you want them in the military?
If my kids want to, good for them, but it is not for me.
Yeah. Um, what do you think is important about sharing your story as a military kid?
Ooh, that's a question. Um, I just think it's important for us to be heard too. We just finished the month of the military child, with April being the month of the military child, and
Mm-hmm.
my school doesn't have a particularly big military child population, but I really wanted to, and I'm going to get moving forward. I really want to make sure those kids are heard and seen, because we talk a lot about the service member, we talk a lot about, maybe even their spouse, and that's very important. It's very important to acknowledge that and to recognize that, but I feel like oftentimes the children are almost overlooked because
Mm-hmm.
of things they also have to deal with, because they're just a kid, they don't get it, but we get it a lot more than I think most people realize.
Oh yeah, and you know, I I don't even think that growing up I even knew people who had parents that were in the military. And granted, I'm from small Nowheresville, Ohio, but I mean, we had people whose grandparents, served in Vietnam or whatever it might be, but we never really had anybody whose parents were in the military. And if they were, they never talked about it. Even if, we were to travel to a bigger city, or I mean, we lived relatively close to Dayton. We just didn't really know anybody, and nobody really talked about it. So I really think that's really cool that you want that to be something that you bring to the forefront, because I think I agree with you, is that a lot of times, yes, the service member is important, and the spouse and everybody makes the house run smoothly whenever the military member is gone. But, I don't think often we talk about the kids and how important it is that they stay there to support mom or dad whenever they're gone. Because, I mean, the kids are important to that service member too. So to make sure that the service member feels important and the kids feel valued and loved is really a big deal.
Yeah, and that's definitely what I want the kids that I work with, is if they are a military kid, I want them to recognize that I see them and I'm there with them because I did it. I lived it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really awesome, And again, I'm gonna say it again, I always think that the military breeds really cool kids, and I think you've grown up to be from a really cool kid to a really cool adult. So I'm really excited to see, how for you to finish school, and you continue to grow as a person. Do you have any last thoughts that you want to impart on us today, or anything else you want to talk about?
Um, no, I don't think so.
All right. Well, to our listeners out there, thanks again for listening us today here on Grit Unleashed. We are so excited to have that we had a Miss Kaylee Nesperos here on the show with us. And you can find us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or on YouTube. And we can't wait for you to hear next week's episode as well. We don't know when part two of Brotherhood is going to come out, but we're so thankful for Kaylee to be here and talk about her life as a military kid. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks.